The game is a Russian roulette game. So every day, you don't know if you're going to live to see the next day. If you don't make enough money, you don't know how bad the pimp's going to beat you, right? Or when I needed to get into a hotel room because I just wanted to lay down, the guy dropped all the bullets, picked up a bullet, put it into the revolver, spun it, and said, "Give me oral sex or I'm going to kill you if you want to sleep in this bed." And he started clicking it. So there's those type of things. That's why it's called the game, because it's a chess game. It's how can I get through the day without getting beat.
Welcome to the Focus on the Family broadcast,
helping you and your family thrive in Christ.
John, that opening comment from our guest, Jean Marie Davis, is beyond belief. I mean, she's describing a nightmare of violence, abuse, crime, and a total disregard of human life. It's hard to comprehend the depths of such evil and sin in our world today. The National Human Trafficking Hotline describes it this way: human trafficking is the business of stealing freedom for profit. In some cases, traffickers trick, defraud, or physically force victims into commercial sex. In others, victims are lied to, assaulted, threatened, or manipulated into working under inhumane, illegal, or otherwise unacceptable conditions. This is a multi-billion-dollar criminal industry that denies freedom to 24.9 million people around the world.
And tragically, Jim, there are people everywhere, not just around the world, but here in the U.S., who are victims of some form of trafficking. We pass them by in the streets. We don't really know. We're oblivious to their pain and their suffering.
And that's why we're sharing Jean Davis's story today. Sometimes in the Christian community, we're tempted to shut and barricade the door to keep out the evils of our world. But that's not the mission that God has called us to. We are called to be salt and light. And I'm reminded of what Jesus says in Matthew 10:16. "Behold, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves." And we need to be aware of evil and sin and then look for ways to bring the gospel of Jesus Christ into that darkness. Thankfully, as we'll hear today, that's exactly what happened with Jean. Christians stepped in and gave her hope for a better future.
And we recorded the following conversation in Houston, Texas, at a small gathering of friends of Focus on the Family, donors who help support this ministry. And Jim, here now is how you began the conversation with Jean Davis on today's episode of Focus on the Family.
You were sex trafficked for more than 20 years. What were the ages? And just explain the game.
So from the age of 2 to the age of 29.
That is heart-wrenching.
Yes. Well, to some people, I don't know. For me, I'm just going to be honest because I consider myself an overcomer. So Genesis 50, verse 20 says, "What was meant for evil, God turned for good to save many lives." And a lot of people, they usually stop at that, what was meant for evil, God turns for good, and then they stop. But you don't capture the whole scripture unless you read it in its full context. And that last part, it says to save many lives. So I am actually grateful that I went through what I went through so that other women can be saved.
Wow. I mean, that's deep stuff. And I think as we move through the discussion tonight, it'll become apparent, not easy. I mean, you make it sound now that it was
just
not
a breeze,
easy.
yeah. Like it was
happened.
It's like a bad movie that I just lived.
But we got to unfold it. So talk about your family origin. What were you experiencing? Mom and dad, what were they like? What was going on in your life?
I was raised with football games, basketball games. So when the football came around, it was football parties, which meant me sitting on a lot of men's laps and different things when I was 2. So at the age of 4, I got my first beer from my father. At the age of 6, I got my first cigarette. By the age of 12, I was doing LSD, shrooms, and acid.
At 12?
At 12. And so that was kind of my life. And then including with the drug and being raised in the bars, because my parents, they would work. And then they would leave me at home and stuff. So whoever was there, they would take me to the bars. And I would have to sit in these bars at the age of 6, 7, while they played darts or whatever. Or I would walk in on 2 women having sex or whatever, or people doing coke and stuff. And or I would be in my room and family members would come in and they would do certain things in molesting and stuff like that. Or I would have my neighbors that were across the street where the kids were, I would see their dad beating their mom, so the kids would run over to my house and hide in my house, or I would run over there and stuff if my family was getting into it and it was fighting. So that's kind of my lifestyle that I lived.
So in that context, though, we all grow up with that desire to be known and to be loved. So how do you find that in that environment?
So my dad used to call me fat, and I remember my mom telling me when I was, I think, 14, who would want to be with you? Right? Or why would anybody want to deal with you? You're so fat. My dad, and then I remember my dad said to me, I was 11, he said, the only way that you'll be married is if you're in a pimp and hoe relationship. And then I remember my dad saying, the reason why I make fun of you all the time is because I don't want you to be teared down by kids in school. If you hear from me, then you'll be able to withstand all the bullies. So then it got to the point where my dad at 16 just straight punched me in my chest and said, take it. You think you're grown. I'm going to beat you and don't cry. And I stood there and took the punches. And that was my life and stuff. So that was love. And that it's the grooming. So when I say that I was trafficked from the age of 2 to 29, when you read my book, I say I officially walked in there when I was 18. So from 2 to 18, I was groomed. I was prepared for it because my dad did so many things to me. So when he would hit me and things like that, I would take it as he loves me. So when my pimps beat me, I thought that they loved me. That's
That
why I
was
got
the language.
That was the language. That was the understanding.
Wow. Take us to that party, and lightly describe
Yep.
that night. I guess you're 18, and what happened?
So I was 18. I was working at a pizza place, and I remember the girl. She was actually, because I was in a same-sex relationship, she was actually my girlfriend, and she said, I'm going to bring you to a party. So we go to this party, and I walk in, and there's half-naked women. There's drugs being passed around. There's money being passed. And I was like, how do I make that? How do I get that money? And so they said, well, come on. And there was 3 men that took me in the back, gave me some ecstasy pills and some weed, and then they gang raped me. And then this one guy said, I choose you. You're going to go out and prostitute for me or hoe for me.
Wow.
And that's how I walked into the human trafficking.
I mean, how much longer are you involved in this, in that moment when you're 18, going from the party? What was that like beyond that? I mean, just coping, eating, having a friendship. How did those things occur?
Right. So they had groups. So I would leave one. That's where my story starts to become different, because some women who've come out of it had only 1 or maybe 2 pimps, and I had multiple, because I would leave one and I would go to another one. And then this other guy would go, oh, I could do something better, or I'll do this, and then I would leave. And then it's what's called a renegade, and a lot of people don't understand that there are women that actually prostitute themselves, but they become more endangered in the fact that when a pimp knows that they're trafficking themselves, then they have more ability to make more money from her. And so I got sucked into it, and guy flew me out. Next thing I know, I'm in a whole nother thing. And I got pimps that were in prisons that I had never met before, and I would get beat behind them and all these things. So all this would happen, and I would run and go to another state and get involved with somebody else. So that was the constant cycle. And I would sit there and I would go through all these things, and then there's a time where it just breaks. And you just realize, like, what is going on? Like, my life is becoming meaningless. Like, I'm becoming useless and worthless, and there's nothing there.
How long was that from turning 18 to starting to feel those thoughts?
10 years.
About 10 years.
10 years.
So you're in that mess. Some have to be thinking to themselves that you can just walk away. So go a little deeper with us about that, as you said, like in a drug abuse situation, a drug
Yep.
addiction. I don't think people see sexual addiction the same way, but it does work on the brain in very similar ways.
Yes.
So your inability to break out of that, I mean, you must have known it was harmful, it wasn't good for you.
Right.
The environment wasn't good. All those things could be true, but you still can't find the way to break free.
Right, because the way the relationship was with the pimps. I would have a pimp, and he would do things to where I didn't want to leave him. But there would be drug dealers that would tell me, leave that pimp, leave that. And I would think, no, you want me to leave because you want me to come to you. No, I got to stay. And then, or there will be the times, well, if you leave me, I'm going to kill you, or I'm going to kill your family, or I'm going to do this. So they always weigh over the head of, if you leave me, you're dead. And I've had that where I've had pimps that have called my family, who have called my friends and have threatened that they were going to kill them and kill me if they couldn't find me and stuff like that. Most pimps won't get their hands dirty. What they use and who they use is what they call a bottom, which is a woman who becomes the one that runs all the girls.
Kind of the police force.
Right, and runs the girls. So for me, because of the life that I lived and because how long I was involved in it, I was considered a madam, which is a woman pimp. So I trafficked women, and then I was also considered a bottom, which which my pimp would bring a girl and say, okay, you tell her what to do and all this stuff, and you run her, and you let me know, and you report back to me. And then I was a renegade, and then I was actually pimped. So there's a whole different a level of,
There's like a hierarchy.
yeah,
That's crazy.
yeah.
Your mom and dad did step in at a time to at least extend some kind of help to you when you were desperate. Describe what happened there. What positive thing did they give you?
So there was a few things. I mean, they did come rescue me at one time.
And how old were you at that point?
I was 19. That's when I
Okay.
was just coming into it. I was in a hotel room for about 3 weeks, and I had multiple, over 100 men, I think, in that week that I was there, and my pimps didn't come, and I had no food, and so I finally called my family, and I'll never forget. I was in a truck, and I was $400 short to give the quota to my pimp, and I remember I sat there and had this argument with this man. And he's like, I could give you $40. I was like, no, I need $400. And I'm in his truck, and I'm like panicking. And I'll never forget that I looked at my phone, and my phone was on. And I picked it up, and I go, hello, hello, hello. And I didn't realize my family tells me, oh, you left a message. We heard the whole conversation. And I go, I never called you. And so that right there was something that they came and got me, and I hid out for about a year. I didn't come. It was six and a half months I was stayed in their house, and then the next 4 or 5 months, that's when they started slowly taking me out into the community.
Right.
And stuff.
And about that point, then something unexpected happened, and you met a charming young man. But it's
Yes.
the same old thing, right?
Yes.
So who is this, and what happened?
He was 26, I was 19, and I was going to college, and he walked up, and how we met, it was very weird because he was like, oh, you're so beautiful. And those words that were foreign to me, because my father never said those type of words to me. And he was like, oh, let me take you out to dinner and let me do this. And then he said, come with me to a party. And I said, okay. And I went to this party, and there was all kinds of cars and everything. And then I walked in, and I go, oh, I actually am now being prostituted again. Like, I'm now having to, he's like, go get dressed and wear this and wear that. And now you got to parade in front of these men. And I had to do different acts to these men to prove to them that I was a good product, or I could make money basically for them.
And I mean, what was inside of you to say, I better leave this house? There was nothing there to run, or did you feel that was too dangerous, or?
So for me, I'm a rebel. I go against the grain, as they would say. So I was like, I'm not doing this. And so I would leave, and then he would come and, bang, and no, you're not going to leave. And he would threaten. So we would go at it with each other, because I have fought in some of my pimps, and because of that, they get shocked because a girl does not swing and does not retaliate when a man attacks them. And so it becomes an actual physical, a man actually is stronger than women. And I realize that after I get my 2 little hits in, and then I have to hide. So that's usually what happens. But yeah, him and I, we went on for years. He told me he had a job, and he had a car, and he had this and all these things that and then I was like, oh, and then he goes, I'll marry you. I'm gonna marry you. And then I come to find out that I'm baby mama number 8 and his 11th child, and he wants nothing to do with me.
That was all a facade.
Yeah.
So just pure manipulation all the time, basically.
Yep.
It's just constant.
Yep.
You mentioned that you feel like now, after becoming a Christian, we're going to get to that story, but that Leah in the Bible was an example for you.
Yes.
I mean, let me be blunt. I mean, you've had this experience. You're that woman.
Yeah.
And then you connect with characters in the Bible like Leah.
Yes.
How?
So when you read Leah, right, her father did not love her as much as he loved Rachel. And instead of presenting her in the open, he hid her and sent her in. And then she then becomes married to Jacob. One of the things that I got the sense of was the fact that she was so desperate for love from this man that she thought that if she had more kids, that would make her feel like he would love her more. And I was just sharing this with some of the ladies at House of Hope that I New Hampshire, that I work with, and I was telling them as we broke it down that her sons carried that bitterness that she had. Because if you really read the story of Joseph, his brothers was bitter. And how was they bitter? Because of Leah. Because Leah probably passed it down, which is what? A generational curse. Right? So if you really delve in and you really break it apart, but then he had a father who flaunted it in front of his brothers. Oh, look, I gave him a coat. He's more special than you 10 brothers that I had. And I was telling them, like, think about it. We're in the desert. Why are you wearing a coat bringing them food? Like, you could have done that on a special occasion. So now, not only that, but you're flaunting it in front of them as well. So now you're not even bringing hatred, and now you're bringing bitterness and jealousy, which equals murder. And that's what they try to do, is they try to murder him.
You describe in the book this idea of empty love.
Yes.
Describe it.
Oh, it is a false narrative. It's a false hope. It's a false understanding.
What is it? Where do we end up on empty love lane?
At the end of the day, you end up when there's nothing else. There's no hope. There's no substance to it. And then you're scrambling. You're like a hamster on a wheel, and you're just starving. I remember when I wrote that, and I'm going to be honest with you, a lot of the stuff that I wrote was in the middle of the night, and the Holy Spirit just dropped it down on me and just said, here, and just downloaded all these things. And when I did Empty Love, I didn't even expect to do it, but it was because of the fact that at the end of my life where I wanted to commit suicide, I was so empty and depleted that I didn't even have love for myself. Like, for those years, I would doll myself up and look all nice and everything like that to give that false hope of love for myself. Because what most women who go into human trafficking is insecure because of something of the way they look or whatever. And so it was so dark. It was almost like it was like mud. It was just like weighing you to where you just can't feel anything. It's almost like you're numb walking through this earth without a hope.
Yeah. I mean, in that context, I mean, what was that first drop of love you actually felt that was genuine?
Phyllis Phelps. Phyllis Phelps.
Now, take some time to think about this.
She'll probably gonna get mad at me, but that woman, I carry her everywhere I go. She gets mad. She goes, "You can't bring me with you." I go, "Oh, I'm bringing you."
Phyllis Phelps. Well, let's get into that story.
Yeah. So 29, I was told by the police that you have 4 states to choose from: Washington, Alaska, Maine, and New Hampshire, because all the other states I was known in the streets. So they said, for your safety, you got to pick those 4 states. And out of those 4 states, 27 shelters denied me because they said my situation was too severe. And so I called. I was 6 o'clock California time, 9 o'clock New Hampshire time, and I just finished calling number 16. There were 16 shelters at the time in Maine, and they all said no. And I called number 17. Her name was Teresa, and she said, "Okay, I'll take you." And she said, "You got to figure out a way to get out here." And I had $1.38 in my name. And I said, "How am I going to figure that out?" And so next thing I know, I look up, and the place that I was staying at was a safe house. They said, "We don't usually do this, but we'll pay for your plane ticket." It's a one-way plane ticket. It was a $500 plane ticket. I ended up in Manchester, New Hampshire, and they told me about a pregnancy center, and they said they believe in Jesus. I said, "Okay, well, whatever. If they can help, great." And through all that, I ended up at the doors of the pregnancy center, not realizing that were the doors. And Teresa said, "Phyllis, can you help this girl?" And I'll never forget, I walked into that center. Man, and Phyllis looked at me, and I was about 5 months pregnant. And I sat down, and she said, "How can I help you?"
And that was the first ray of hope.
That was the first ray. How can I help you? But it's not just the words, "How can I help you?" There was something in her eyes that I wanted. When I looked at her, I knew she knew where I came from. And I just stared at her, and I said, "I want what you have. I don't know what it is, but I want what you have."
How did she respond?
She said, we went through the process of, because I was abortion-minded and I was thinking of getting rid of my child, and she allowed me to hear the heartbeat. And when she convinced me to keep my son, I said, "Now what?" And the next word she said to me was, "I can't help you, but I know a man named Jesus who can."
What a statement. I know a man named Jesus who can help you. What a wonderful turnaround experience for Jean Marie Davis. And she's been sharing her dramatic life story with us. Jim, it's unfortunate that we have to stop right here. It's just the beginning of an incredible story. It's kind of a cliffhanger for us. God did a remarkable work in Jean's life, and we do hope you're making plans now for the balance of the conversation on the next episode of Focus on the Family.
John, before we close today, I'd like to share a couple of observations about what we've heard thus far. First, isn't it remarkable how no one is beyond God's reach? I often say that, but I'm too shocked that someone like Jean Davis was not beyond his reach. I mean, there were so many people, even members of her own family, who saw Jean as a lost cause. People dismissed her, abused her, and even threatened to kill her. But all along the way, God was protecting Jean and guiding her steps toward her ultimate rescue and salvation. Secondly, Jean's story points directly to the amazing impact that pregnancy resource centers, or PRCs, are having all over this nation. These centers are the front line of the pro-life movement, helping rescue preborn babies and their moms from abortion. Jean said it herself. She was abortion-minded and thinking of getting rid of her child, killing her child. until Phyllis showed her a better choice. And as we'll hear in the next episode, that help went far beyond saving the baby. Jean was able to get off drugs, find a place to live, get job training, get a job, and so much more. And that's why Focus on the Family is working arm in arm with pregnancy resource centers, so together we can rescue and save more families that are at risk.
And one way you can help is through supporting Option Ultrasound, where Your Giving equips pregnancy medical centers with training and machines so they can provide free ultrasounds to women who are considering abortion. And these women need to know about the precious life made in the image of God that they're carrying.
And you can be part of that outreach for life. We've been doing this now for 20 years. We know the metrics. Your gift of $60 will help save both a mother and her child from abortion. So help us help them by donating to Focus on the Family today. Option Ultrasound is just one part of our See Life campaign, where we help rescue preborn babies, advocate for life in today's culture, and empower friends like you to get involved with a PRC in your local area.
Learn more when you call 800, the letter A in the word family, or check the program description for all the details. And on our next episode, we'll share part 2 of Jean's incredible story, how God provided her with not only a new life and a hope for a better future, but also a ministry to rescue women like she was from the streets. I'm John Fuller, and thanks for joining us for Focus on the Family with Jim Daly. Join us again tomorrow when we continue the conversation and once more help you and your family thrive in Christ.